Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar today. Today's Unanet webinar is in our foundation series and is going to cover everything you wanted to know about accounts payable and accounts receivable. Now this webinar is perfect for those of you who are currently using financials and would like an overview of the AP and AR functionality, or for those of you that may be considering an upgrade to financials and would like to see how it works. Now today, if you have questions, we just ask you to type them into the questions box that's on your webinar dashboard, and we'll review them at the end of the webinar. Now this webinar will be recorded and will be available within a week, just in case you want to review it again, or if you have someone else on your team who would like to take a look at it. Now, I am Stacy Ricola. I'm part of the Customer Success Management team here at Unanet. Now, just to go over, our Customer Success Manager is your main point of contact within Unanet. We are here to help take the confusion out of who you need to contact when you have a question or an issue. We also want to make sure that you are getting all the benefits of your Unanet license type. So we do this by making sure we keep you up to date on any added functionality, and also by scheduling customer success reviews, which are also called account reviews, just to assure that you're using all of the functionality currently available to you. And of course, you know that you can reach out to us for additional licenses, license upgrades, and additional services. Now, it's not too late to register for our 2018 Champions Conference. This year's event will be held in Tysons Corner, Virginia at the Ritz-Carlton on April 26th and 27th. And don't forget about the pre-conference classroom sessions that we'll be having on Wednesday, April the 25th. You can see all the details, the agenda, all of that at unanetchampions.com. Now let's get started. I would like to introduce our presenter for today. We are happy to have Robin Bell joining us from the Unanet University team. Robin, are you ready to kick us off?
Hi, yes, thanks, Stacy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. I'm Robin Bell, part of the Unanet University team, and I focus primarily on learning around financials functionality. I'm excited today to walk through the accounts payable and accounts receivable functionality as our topic for our foundation series. As you can see on the screen, our agenda today is going to start out by going through roles and approval workflow, and then we'll talk about setup and then transactions and reporting, and end with a wrap-up. As Stacy mentioned, as we go through the webinar, please add your questions to the questions box on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and we're going to do our best to answer those for you at the end. So in your office in real life, sometimes you have people who perform different functions within accounts payable and accounts receivable, or I'll call those AP and AR. And you're able to have segregation of duties. However, sometimes in smaller companies, many times one person has to wear multiple hats and process a transaction from beginning to end. Unanet is built to accommodate either one of those scenarios. Stacy, can we please check with our audience and see if our attendees have this same situation? Let's please launch poll question number 1. And if you're just logging on to the webinar, please go ahead and submit a response to the question, do you currently perform multiple functions, meaning you wear many hats for your company within AP and or AR? Stacy, are you there?
Oh, yes. Okay, here we have the results. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So we had about 95% voted.
Awesome, and I see that many of you do wear multiple hats, so that's great. So we're going to go through the functions and kind of show you how that works in Unanet. Awesome, thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
So let's jump right in and take a look at our financial roles, specifically focusing on AP and AR. So financial areas all have the viewer, user, poster, and administrator roles. The viewer roles have view access only to the organization's dashboard and the reports dashboard. They can view both account and organization hierarchies from that reports dashboard. They cannot view transaction data from within the menu items in the financials dashboard with just the viewer role. The user roles have access from the financials dashboard to create, save, edit, copy, submit, and delete transactions. The copy function is available for many transactions, and delete is available if your system properties are set to allow deletions. Users may also view organization information. The poster roles can perform all functions of the user role, and in addition, they can post and void. And then the administrator roles have access to, for AP and AR specifically, have access to organizations, bank accounts, payment methods, and a few various other items. So that means they can make edits to those things and not just view them. The admin roles generally do not have the ability to create, process, or post transactions unless you give them that user or poster role. One exception to that, the AP administrator is the only role besides the system admin that can create vendor invoices from expense reports. The user, poster, and admin roles will not have access to reports from the reports dashboard for AP and AR unless they also have the viewer roles for that area. Financial document statuses are in use, submitted, or posted. The in-use status occurs when a document is saved and assigned a document number. You may delete only from an in-use status, again, if your system properties allow deletions, and documents with an in-use status are not available to view in the general ledger. This is the only status where you can edit. The submitted status means the document has been entered with all the required fields and has been submitted for posting. Documents must be in a submitted status in order to be posted. And again, they are not available to view in the general ledger just yet. Once they're posted, that means the document has been posted to the general ledger and is viewable in reports. When voiding a document, the void posts automatically. For transactions where the copy function is available, copying may be performed for a document from any status. AP user and poster roles have the ability to view organization data from the organization dashboard, but may not make any changes. So you see circled on the screen there, they have just the eyeglasses to view. AP administrators and AR administrators can add or make updates because they have the edit capability, and you can see that they have the edit pencil there. The most important piece of information for transactions is the customer profile for customers and the vendor profile for vendors. Without the customer or vendor profile, you won't be able to process transactions even if the organization exists. This is the critical piece of setup. So the menu on the left there, you see the customer profile. That's the crucial piece, same thing for the vendors. You must associate the customer or the vendor with one or more legal entities in order to process transactions, because the system is looking behind the scenes and enforcing some business logic when we use financial organizations. So it must be associated with that legal entity. And our example shows a customer, but again, the same is true for vendors. AP and AR administrators have the ability to add or modify bank account information in the Admin Setup Accounting menu. You should set up bank accounts for each real-life bank account from your brick and mortar banks, and you must have at least one account designated as the type of bank, as you see there in our second column, if you want to generate accounts payable system checks from Unanet. Payment methods. AP and AR administrators have the capability to add or modify payment method information in the Admin Setup Accounting menu. You should set up payment methods to mirror each way that payments come in or go out in real life. So for example, for AP, you might have system checks generated from Unanet, ACH payments, wires, and so on. For AR, you might have hard copy checks coming in and ACH transfers directly to your account from the customer. Payment methods are required fields for AP vendor payment and AR customer payment transactions. User and poster roles do not have access to the admin dashboard, so they can't see information for bank accounts or for payment methods. We won't go into details on some other financial setup that you might want to consider, but some things to think about might be deletions. Whether you want to give users the ability to delete in-use transactions, duplicate checking for AP vendor invoices, where you can give a hard error, a soft error, or no duplicate checking at all. I'm a tough love kind of a girl, so I would say let's give a hard error. Whether you want to provide access for the system administrator to unpost a customer payment. Be very cautious with anything that begins with un. 1099s, you do have the ability to set up configure the system to capture 1099 information, and so we'll touch on that briefly again later. Something to think about, and also what accounts you're going to need for your AP payments and your AR customer payments coming in. What sort of payment terms do you want to set up? So have all of those things set up in advance before you try to do transactions. And of course, more information on all of these things are available in the Knowledge Center. Moving on to transactions. We're going to go in the system momentarily to review a demo, but first let me give you a quick overview of the types of transactions that you're going to see in AP and AR. Starting with accounts payable. So for vendor invoices, you may enter the invoice information manually, or your system administrator could import the information for vendor invoices. We also have recurring vendor invoices. So this is great if you have, monthly rent and utilities and things that happen every month, then you could just set up that recurring vendor invoice and then just change the amount if needed every month. For vendor payments, you can create a single vendor payment without going through the invoice process. Let's say, for example, you need to make a tax payment, something like that. When associating them with vendor invoices, or I guess otherwise, we have three types of payments. System check, which generates a printable PDF output. Manual check, so this is where you had to record the check outside of Unanet, but you still need to record that payment and make sure it's captured in your general ledger. And then other, which is really anything else such as ACH or wires, or maybe you have a P card or something, however else you're making payments. So we would set up those payment methods, payment types, and the system will give you those three ways to make your payments. I always encourage everyone, where possible, to use the bulk vendor payment creation functionality. That way you are assured that your invoices and your payments are linked. On the accounts receivable side of transactions, for customer payments, again, you may enter the payment information manually, or a system administrator can import the information. And you can associate more than one customer invoice with a vendor payment, customer payment. Maybe the customer sends you a check and it's for 3 invoices. Of course, we can easily link those all together. The customer payments will have payment types of check, which requires you to enter a check number, or other. So when you have those, ACH payments and so forth coming in. For deposits, you may enter your deposit information through the user interface for various types of deposits. You also have the undeposited funds process, which we're not going to go into in detail today, but certainly if you have any questions on that, then put those in your questions box and we'll get to that at the end of our presentation. So now let's go into our live Unanet environment. Oops, I'm sorry, I almost skipped reporting there. For AP and AR viewer roles from the reports dashboard, we see that we have both aging and activity reports for AP and AR. So we're going to look at those in the system when we go into our live environment for real this time. So let me pull that up. And I'm going to be logging in as various users to show you what the different roles look like. A lot of times, many of us have the system administrator role and we can see everything all the time, and we forget that people can't always see everything. So I'm going to log in first as our AP user, Victor Voucher. Oops. And maybe I am, maybe I'm not. And my apologies. Let me try. Actually, we can log in as our supervisor because they can do everything that Victor can do. There we go. All right, so I'm logged in as Allie AP Poster, and Allie can do everything that the AP user can do. You see she doesn't have a lot of dashboards up here, so she has limited access. So first, we're going to enter a vendor invoice with an attachment, and we can click into Accounts Payable, Vendor Invoices. Now, if I only had the AP user role, I would see invoices, payments, and bulk vendor payment creation, and that would be it. So we're going to enter a vendor invoice that relates to a project. So as in most areas in Unanet, if you want to add something, you click the plus sign on whatever screen you're on there. And we have great auto-populate functionality. So I can just start typing in a character string, and you can see that my vendor pops right up there. Remember from talking about organizations, if I didn't have a vendor profile, I would not be able to input that vendor name, even by just typing it in. The payment terms also defaulted in. You see this net 30 that defaulted in from my vendor profile. I can change that if needed. So I'm going to enter my invoice amount and my invoice reference number and the invoice date. And a description, I'll just say software. So the invoice date in conjunction with the payment terms drives the due date. So you see if I change my invoice date to the 27th, that my due date changed a day back. So changing your invoice date is going to change your due date based on whatever payment terms you have. So we can change the default payment terms as well if needed, if this is really late for whatever reason and we want to pay it right away. Again, you see the due date is updated based on the combination of the invoice date and the payment terms. I can also add a discount date or amount and require a separate payment if needed. The system will default to grouping several invoices together into a single payment unless you want to change that, and certainly you have the choice to do that. Your accounts payable AP account, this is your liability account where everything's going to go, defaults in from your posting group settings, and you can change that. I would say just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you have a really compelling reason to change this, then yes, it is possible to change it, but for now I'm going to leave that as is along with my AP organization. The document date and post date, very important. You should have internal business guidelines for your own company on these dates. The document date, when I used to manage an AP shop 100 years ago, I like to see the document date as today because that tells me which date it was entered. But that's really up to you in your business process and whatever makes sense to you. The post date, maybe a lot of people leave this as today as well, or maybe I want to make sure that it's the last calendar day of every month. You can see my fiscal period. If I change the post date to April, it changes the fiscal period. And when I change it back, then it changes the post date back. So these have to be in sync. The system is going to make sure that these two things are in sync. But for your document date and post date, you should have internal business processes that kind of give you your guidelines there. The important thing to remember is that the post date is driving the fiscal period in which the vendor invoice is going to be recorded in the GL. We're not going to go in depth into recurring invoices, but certainly we'll take your questions on those later on in the webinar. So once I save this transaction, the system assigns a document number, as you can see here, and all of that summary or header information that I just entered is changeable if needed from my summary menu. We can attach documents, so no more binders, no more giant file cabinets full of giant binders. You can attach a copy of the invoice here, and whenever you save that, your poster will be able to go in and make sure that the details as entered into the system match the details on the hard copy invoice. So that's a great feature for our financial documents. Now, if this did not relate to a project, let's just say that this was a G&A other cost or something, okay? So if we're not related to a project, so this account doesn't require a project in the account setup, you can see this is great. I'm clicking furiously here, and the project is not, I can't enter anything. The system won't allow me to enter a project in that case. So you can enter without projects or with projects. But I'd like to demonstrate showing with a project. So let me just get rid of these. And let's kind of go back here to wipe that out, wipe out the memory there. Oops. Oh, you see, I accidentally hit submit. And it told me I can't submit without the right information. So now I'm going to say, this is direct costs. And so I want maybe direct other. And that went to my digital services organization. And the reference information here will default in the first time you enter it here. If you go back and change it on the summary tab, it's not going to update here. This is informational only. These reference fields on the line item are not driving any functionality of the system. They are literally reference only, okay? So now that I've put in a general ledger account code that requires a project, I'm going to have to put a project in here. So let me enter my project. And again, I start typing and auto-populate brings it up. And maybe I don't remember which task, but I'll know it when I see it. So I can use my wildcard here to figure out which task I need to use. The project type defaults in from the project. And you can see an expense type defaulted in also. Now, if this doesn't look right, again, let me put in that % sign, and maybe there's a list here and I get the closest thing. In this case, it was right for ODCs. If something doesn't automatically populate in this expense type field, you need to contact your system administrator because there's some behind the scenes setup that is missing. The expense type is required field when you're using projects on vendor invoices because this is the link over to your cost element, and that means that's the link to your project accounting reports. If it's project related, you want it to show up on those project accounting reports, and so that expense type has to be there. So if this is blank, when you put in everything else, contact your system admin to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that one. And it's now ready for posting, obviously not in the AP aging yet because they haven't been posted. And if you'll note, my entry screen retained, my dates and things from the last entry. So I'd love to show every variation, but we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to vendor payments. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pull up my reports dashboard over here. And I just want to take a look at my AP aging and see what that looks like. And I'm just going to run it from today with all of the defaults. And you can see that I owe $39,000, almost $40,000. So let's leave that as is. And now I'd like to go to bulk vendor payment creation. I love doing the bulk vendor payment creation. You can do a whole bunch at once. You don't have to go in and create payments individually. So I'm going to put my due date out through March 31st. Because I'm going to create some system checks and I need time for them to get mailed out to the vendor and I don't want them to be late. Certainly, if you want to narrow down the criteria here, you have many other fields to do that. I just want to see everything that's available for payment. So I'm going to leave all of that wide open. So I'm paying out of my operating account. The payment date is very important. That's going to have to match the check date when the poster goes in to create these. And then again, your post date, based on your internal business process for payments, I like leaving this the same as the payment date. And we are going to process some system checks. So now I've got all my settings to tell the system what I want to do. And I've got a bunch of stuff that's out there to be available for payment. So you can grab all of these and create payments all at once. Or maybe I want some of these I'm going to save in my demo for the ACH payments, maybe my employees and one of my vendors. So I only want to create payments for these 6 invoices. So you see how the total, or maybe you didn't see, but the total updated here based on what I had selected. So it changes if you select or deselect. So I'm going to create the payments. And note when I go to the list, green is good, that they are created in an in-use status. So I want you to note something very important here. When you're creating system checks, they are going to skip the submitted status. So that's the only financial document that does that. So just make a note, your system checks are going to skip the submitted status. All right, let's quickly go in and also create some ACH payments. So I'm going to do the same thing and do everything due as of March 31st, even though it's a little faster. I still want things to get there in plenty of time. So again, same thing here. For me, I would leave these as today. Whatever your business process says is what you should do. And then this defaults automatically because these are in alphabetical order. Very important for non-system check payments. Take advantage of this transaction options button down here to submit payments after creation. So if I had, 50 payments I wanted to make for ACH, they're all going to be created in an in-use status, and I don't want to have to go in and individually submit them. So I'm going to utilize this awesome function right here to submit payments after creation. All right, so when I create those, they'll be created in a submitted status. And so just in case we have anything we want to hold off for later for questions, I'll uncheck a couple of these. And again, you saw the totals down here update when you check or uncheck things. And so now these are in a submitted status, and you can see it grouped all of the invoices together by vendor, and I have a submitted status. And since I am the poster role, I'm Allie AP Poster, I could go ahead and post these. Let's first post our vendor invoices that we created. So I'm Allie AP Poster. And if I'm Allie, I'm probably going to do something awesome for myself. And I'm going to pull up everything in an in-use and submitted status. And I'm going to save that criteria to maybe my home dashboard. And I'm going to call it AP Vendor Invoices Not Yet Posted, or something that's meaningful to me. So that way every day I can go to my home dashboard and just pull up this list, and it's going to bring me everything back with that criteria. So it's a great way to have a list. Very, very handy. So we have our invoice that we created today that was submitted for Highway Software. So let's go ahead and post that one. Okay. And then we want to look at our aging. So our aging was 39,939. And now it's a little higher, right? Because we just posted this vendor invoice for Highway Software for 3,300. So as soon as you post things, you're going to be able to view on the aging. Now let's post our vendor payments. So for Allie, again, I can look for my vendor payments. I would probably save my list of these on my home or my financials dashboard or wherever makes sense. And in-use defaults, I want to see in-use and submitted. So let's see, everything that's out there in-use and submitted. So I've got several things that are in use, and you can see those are all my system checks. Why? Because they skip the submitted status, remember? So I've already reviewed these. In a perfect world, of course, I would take time to go in and take a look and see how they look, but I'm going to go ahead and post my ACH ones here, okay? And green is good. Now, when I go back, all I need to do is come to my search tab, and I need to tell the system a little more information on what I want to do about printing checks. So I want to print checks. I want to go from my operating bank account, and check date must be the same as the payment date that we used when we were creating the checks. And you can see my first check number defaults in here. So that was based on the last check that was created. It's using sequentially the next number. You can see this is changeable. Again, I don't necessarily recommend doing that unless you have a very compelling reason. You probably want to leave that alone. Then we come over to our list tab, and you can see all of my system checks that I would like to create checks for. And if something, still looks wonky, I can, I don't have to create all of these. I can leave that one out and just generate checks for everything else. So here we have the PDF, and let's see where it's coming up, of my system checks and the check stub. And let me bring it over so you can see it. All right, so you have your DLT 104 check stock, and so this is what's going to print out on your check stock. So you see all of my various vendors here, and I can eyeball this and make sure everything, oh look, they're on Flyaway in San Diego. So you can look at this and make sure everything is, making sense. And I would probably save that off somewhere, but you don't have to. You do have the option to reprint checks later if you need to. You also have a check continuation report. If we had a vendor and we had one payment, but there were maybe 30 invoices on that one payment, there's not enough room on the check stub for all of those to be listed, so that would show up on your check continuation report. So it's still not too late if something looked wonky. You looked at the PDF and said, oh crap, I should have put that vendor invoice on hold, I forgot. That's okay. You can, tell the system which checks to void, or maybe put the check stock in upside down and everything was incorrect. Dang it, that does happen. That's okay. Just check that middle radio button there. In our case, we're going to say everything printed correctly, and we're going to complete the check generation. So that also posts these payments. So I don't have to go in and do a separate posting process. So now back over on my AP aging report, when I refresh it, it's a lot smaller because we just made a whole bunch of payments and our aging looks a lot better than it did. Now you saw how easy it is to enter information through the user interface, but remember, vendor invoice and vendor payment information absolutely can be imported in either an in-use or submitted status by the system administrator. All right, so one last thing on the AP side for accounts payable, creating vendor invoices from expense reports. So the system administrator can do this. So our AP poster, Allie, also has the system admin role. And this, besides the system admin, is the only person who can create vendor invoices from expense reports. So in this case, I'm going to say, show me everything that's out there, and I'll leave my document date and post date as today. Again, that's up to you. Maybe you want it the last calendar day, whatever works. So then for my list, I can see, ooh, I have a lot of employee expense reports where I need to reimburse my employees. This one looks funny because it's two separate ones, but it has the same amount. They were completed on the same date. So if I have any questions, I can drill right in. Anything that's blue in Unanet, you can drill in. So I can drill in and look at the details of Caroline users. So I can see that her dates here were the week of 7/17, and her dates here were the week of 7/24. Okay, so she, did the same trip those 2 weeks, so that should be okay. So you have the capability to go in and review these if you need to. Hopefully, your expense report approval process has worked well and it has already been scrubbed pretty well before it gets here. So I can grab all those at once, as you just saw me do, and create vendor invoices from expense reports. Wait for it.
That was easy.
That was so easy, just the click of a button. So when I look at this list, you can see that my vendor invoices are in a submitted status and ready to be posted. So there's a couple things I want you to note on this process. So before we can create vendor invoices from expense reports, the expense reports must be in a locked or extracted status in order to be available. If you're going to pay your employees out of Unanet for expense reports, some people don't. Some people send it over to payroll, and that's okay. But if you plan to reimburse your employees out of Unanet, you must set up a vendor organization with that very crucial vendor profile for the employee, and then associate that in their person record on the expense tab. And then lastly, if you void a vendor invoice, so you've posted it already and then for some reason you need to void it, you're not going to be able to recreate it with this process. You would have to manually recreate that invoice. So lots of very, very cool stuff. So let's go ahead and hopefully Debbie deposit on the AR side. We have her password set correctly. Let's see if we do. So we're going to start in on the AR. And again, as you have questions, please put them in the questions box and we'll try to get to everything at the end. All right, so this is our AR user. Again, you see she has a sort of a limited menu. And I'm going to go ahead and just drag up my reports dashboard and run my accounts receivable aging. I'm just going to kind of run it from today and see what it looks like. So our customers need to send us some payments. Wow, we've got a pretty big list there, 1.694. So on the AR side, I can easily enter payments. You can see her menu is very limited by going in and doing plus customer payment. So you can either start entering information in the grid here, which is totally fine, or we have this awesome function right here that says look up invoices. So I can just say, I know this was a check from customer 2, and then voila, everything from customer 2 pops up. So I know that it was this invoice. Ooh, look at that. As soon as I hit customer 2, their balance popped up. And as soon as I selected an invoice here, the payment amount popped up. Let me select the other invoice that supposedly was paid. And you can see it updates this automatically down below. So this is a great feature that is a little more recent. So I want to know what bank account this money is coming into, right? So just start typing in there, or again, you can use the percent sign. And if I want, I can put in my invoice numbers here for the description. And this was a check. And so I will have to put the check number if it was a check. And again, document date, payment date, whatever your internal guidelines, whatever makes sense for you, just remember the post date is driving the fiscal period that this will be posted in. Excuse me. So you can, once again, remember you can change the summary info if you need to. And if we had entered things down in the grid without doing that invoice lookup, I would click on paid documents, and I'll click on paid documents anyway. And these are just automatically already checked off. So that's just, it's just so easy. I love the AR functionality. You can really just get in and check, associate these and submit them, post them, whatever you got to do. You can also do write-offs here. So if you gave somebody, something was damaged or whatever, you're giving them a break for whatever reason, you can process a write-off here. If they have discount terms, you could do a discount here as well. And so again, very easy. They already gave us the names of the invoices that we were paying, so we can choose those and then go ahead and submit it. One thing that's important to remember for customer payments, so if you get a payment and you have no idea what invoices it applies to, that's okay. You can enter that payment, save it, submit it, and even post it. If that happens, you'll see there's an unapplied amount, and then you can go in at a later date and select the customer invoices once you figure out what those are. And also, as with vendor payments, customer payments may also be imported in an in-use or submitted status by the system administrator. All right, so let's go take a look at posting that. So I'm going to log in as our AR poster, who also happens to be our AR admin, because we're a small company here at MyCo, and we need to wear many hats. And so let's go to the AR aging and see if we can refresh it. And 1694, obviously, that didn't change. So I think I was in as Debbie, so that was interesting. It would allow me to refresh it. All right, so Parker Poster is going to go into the customer payments. And if I were Parker, I would do what Allie did and save this criteria on my home dashboard so that at any time I can see what's out there ready to post. So once I post this payment, now when we go refresh our report, you can see that it came down a little bit because one of those invoices was paid. It came off the report and was $16.94, I think. Now we're down to $16.86. So we also have available, which I love this, and this again was a little more recent meaning within the last year or two, or after the initial rollout of financials. We have the AR activity report. So if I want to see everything for, let's say, customer 2 for the current fiscal year maybe, and I want both invoices and payments, which is the default, I can run that report and see everything. Let me make that a little smaller so you can see it. And you can see the CI are your customer invoices and the CP are your customer payments. And again, I can drill in. It's blue. If it's blue, I can drill in and I can see the details of this one payment where we paid several invoices. All right, let's go back to our presentation and talk briefly about a few other things that I'd like you to be aware of. On the accounts payable side, recurring vendor invoices. So as I mentioned earlier, you can create them for things like rent or utilities you're paying every month. So you just hit the recurring box on the summary screen, enter the number of occurrences, and then when that one is posted, the next occurrence is going to be created in the next fiscal period in an in-use status. So you'll be able to go in and update, the details as needed. So once you post it, the next occurrence is created. Copy function is available from pretty much any status for vendor invoices and other financial transactions. So if you need to void something, sometimes that's the easiest way to recreate it is go copy it and then make the correction for whatever it was voided. Reprint system check. So if you forget to save a copy of that PDF that was created when you generated your system checks, you have the ability to reprint those checks. Let's say your auditor comes in and they want to see them. You just hit the little print icon there. That's from your accounts payable menu and the check print history. Positive pay and ACH templates. Unanet provides templates for sending ACH payment information and positive pay information to the bank. But just keep in mind, you'll likely need to adjust these templates based on the configuration in your individual company's setup. So also in AP, you may change the payee name if needed for vendor payments. You can hold payments at the vendor organization or the individual invoice level. And you may create a separate payment for each vendor invoice if needed. You can create a single vendor payment and associate it with a vendor invoice rather than going through that bulk payment process that I recommended. Or if you have payments that are unrelated to your goods and services vendors, like a tax payment or something, and you don't want to go through that invoice process, you certainly can make that single vendor payment on its own. You would just add the debit account information from the details menu. Now let's look at a few things to note on the accounts receivable side. Undeposited funds. Users can use a combination of deposits and customer payments functionality to record deposits in an undeposited funds account if desired. Some people love this, some people hate it, some people don't care. It's really just to let you know that it's there. And if you do use this, it will help you facilitate an easier bank reconciliation when you receive multiple checks and kind of batch them all together into one bank deposit. We also have the unpost functionality that I mentioned earlier. Voiding is recommended for times when an error was made, which happens, and a customer payment needs to be redone, because this leaves an audit trail in the general ledger. However, there could be exception situations where a transaction maybe needs to be kind of unwound. So in this case, the system administrator could perform an unpost of the customer payment, assuming your system property settings allow this action. You see the giant capital letters in the middle of the property there to say, be really, really careful doing this. This process does not leave an audit trail whatsoever. It's as if it never happened. And so impacts should be considered carefully before proceeding with an unpost. Remember, for anyone who's ever been in my classes, go ahead, say it along with me. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So think very carefully before doing anything that begins with un. So just a quick recap of things we've covered today. So we looked at roles, we looked at our financial document statuses and workflow, we looked at several transactions, and we also looked at reports and of course some of the underlying setup to make that all happen. So that is everything. I know it was a lot of information, so hopefully you have some questions for me. Stacy, do we have any questions?
We actually do, and they're very good questions. The first one is, what is the difference between locked and extracted?
So one happens automatically, and one takes a step in the system to do it. So when things are fully approved, let's say an expense report is fully approved, it becomes in a completed status. There is a property setting in the system admin properties where you can auto lock, meaning as soon as it's fully approved, I want to lock it down so nobody can edit it, okay? And then that way it's locked, it's ready for posting. It's ready for your expense report cost post. It's ready to create vendor invoices from expense reports, ready for the billing revenue post also. Extracted means that I can take things either from the completed or locked status and extract them and marking them with an extracted status. Usually when we extract things, it means we're sending them downstream to another system. For instance, your payroll data. So your timesheets, you want to take those timesheets and send them down to payroll. I know that everything that shows as extracted is already in my payroll system, so I don't want to pick up any of that in my new export. So locked and extracted, neither one of those are editable. So you can't go in and make adjustments when things are in that status. And locked is automatic, extracted requires an extra step. I hope that answered your question.
Perfect. Okay, we often receive payments with interest included for past due invoices. How would we post this in Unanet?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever had that question before. I think I need to look at that and get back to you on that one. That's a great question. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, we invoice quarterly. If I have a credit to be carried forward across multiple quarters, does the credit balance show on the customer profile and or the customer invoice?
So you have a balance, meaning they did a prepayment, or meaning there's just a balance they owe you? I guess I'm not sure what you're asking. So if they did a prepayment, let's say they did a prepayment of $250.
Okay, she responded. She said there was a prepayment, and
Yep.
we apply the current bill to the prepayment.
Got it. Okay, so let's say they did the prepayment. I can post that prepayment, and then when I go back into my list, you see I've got a little green plus sign here. So you can absolutely go back in there and say, okay, now we're going to apply this current invoice, which is this one, and post that one. And it'll give you this little, are you sure it doesn't equal 0? Yes, of course, we're sure. And then I can just keep going in, every quarter or every month, as the case may be. And you could put in your document number if that's easier. And you can see there's my balance, and I can open that up again. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Next we have, how do you generate customer statements and assess finance charges in AR?
So customer, we don't necessarily have a statement that shows a beginning balance and an ending balance. We do have the activity report. So you could certainly say, for customer one, I want to see everything for the current, calendar year invoices and payments. So you could send them this, but to assess additional charges for them, I would say that would be an additional item on an invoice, would be my first thought. But I can ask the consulting team and see what their thoughts are on that. But my first thought would be to do a separate invoice with an additional item.
Okay, very good. How do you enter a memo on the check when you run them as bulk vendor payment creation?
Let's see what's on our checks. So let me get out as Parker because he doesn't have any AP capabilities and he won't be able to access those. So let me make this might be too small for you guys. Make that a little bit bigger. Hopefully that's better. So I can go to my check print history. And when we look at the checks, I believe it is, I meant to say open there. I believe it's the reference or might be the description, actually reference and description. So your description field, when you enter the vendor invoice, I believe should do that, but we can certainly test that out. I'll test that and get back to you, but I believe it's the description is where you could enter. Let's see if we have any other ones. Yeah, so the description comes over on your pay stub there.
Okay.
Yeah, placement fee, yep.
Okay, thank you. We have several more. They're rolling in. This is great.
Awesome, awesome.
We'll keep going as long as we can. Can Unanet drive vendor payments with positive pay?
Drive vendor payments with positive pay. I'm not sure what you're asking there. We do have a positive pay export template that you would send to the bank and let the bank know. For anyone on the call who may not know what positive pay is, it's a risk mitigation function where basically, you run your pay cycle today to pay your vendors. The bank has no idea what people you're paying and what amounts those are and all of that good stuff. They have no idea you ran a check cycle. So you would send a file over to the bank that says the payee name, the amount, the date, the check number. Usually that's pretty much all that they need. And then when the check is presented for payment, they double check it against the file that you sent them to make sure that that's the right thing, that the payee name wasn't changed, there's fraud or something. So we do have the capability to send that file to the bank from Unanet, but I'm not sure, maybe you can help type into the chat some more, or the question box, some more details on driving vendor payment from positive pay. I'm not sure what you're asking there, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we'll move on and then I'll look to see if she responds.
Yeah.
Yes. What is a system check?
So the system check is, let me come back to my system here. So when we set up our payment methods, we have 3 payment types for AP that we can select. So we have system check, manual check, and other. So the system check is the only one that you're going to be able to literally print out the checks from Unanet. So it gives you that PDF output. The other 2 do not. So manual check is if you had your stack of check stock, right, and the vendor was standing right in front of you and you had to quickly write them out because they're breathing down your neck, and then you record that in the system. That is just recording in the system. The other is just recording in the system and then sending the file over to the bank, maybe for ACH. System check is the only one where you are printing the checks out of Unanet for accounts payable.
Okay. Is there a recurring vendor invoice report?
You cannot necessarily report, but you certainly can pull up that information. Now, this is our demo system. I can't guarantee how much are in here, but let's take a look. So on your vendor invoices, you would want to look at your originating document number. So I'm just going to, for fun, put something like that in. So you can, because we don't have reversing, we know that all of these are recurring. So I would do something that has, or maybe you have something that has a 0 in our case, which again would pull up everything because everything has a leading 0. And so, oops, sorry, I need to open up my time frame because none of those are in the current month. So you open up your time frame and then you can see the originating document number and then all the subsequent document numbers. I hope that helps.
Great. Okay, what is the easiest way to write off an old balance on a vendor account? I have a balance from 2017 that I know isn't valid, and it throws off the AP report every time I run it.
I would just enter your own offset. So if this is for our friends at Highway Software, oops, just enter this and then put an attachment with your documentation or something, because the auditors are going to be like, why do you have a negative vendor invoice in there? But if you know it's not valid and the vendor hasn't sent you a credit memo, you can enter your own. I would just document it and put your reasons why wherever you can. You've got the description field and the comments field, and again, if you have any documentation that you could attach, you could certainly do that as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep going. We have
Sure.
3 minutes. Is there any way to reverse an extracted document, like an expense report? We had some issues in our setup that we didn't realize until the expense reports were extracted, and we need to undo them and recreate the expense report correctly.
Yes. So right now, I would say probably the easiest and fastest would be to just create the negative of that expense report, which sometimes if you have wizards, you could import that unless you have a wizard, like Airfare or something uses a wizard. You can't always do that. So if it's only a couple, I would say just do the negative of it to offset it and then put in the right one. Coming functionality with, I believe, the next large release with purchasing, we are going to have a void expense reports functionality coming. So that should help in those kinds of situations. If you have a large amount that you need to do, check with your CSM and they can help. They can grab a consultant or whatever and just kind of get your specifics. I don't want to give you advice not knowing exactly the volume and the situation and everything. Talk to your CSM and they can grab a consultant if they need to and help advise you.
Okay, thank you. One more, and then we can wrap things up. If a customer makes an overpayment to an invoice for the prior month, how can I show the credit to the customer on the new invoice?
On the new invoice, I do.
Or next, she had another line, next invoice, like the correcting invoice.
I'm trying to remember, and invoice formats are not my strong suit. I'll be very honest with you, but there might be an AR balance that we could put on the customer invoice, but let me check that out and get back to you.
Okay, sounds good. We have a few more, but I will make sure that each CSM will reach out to the rest of you that have these lingering questions. So
for
thank
sure.
you. Yes.
For sure, we can follow up. Absolutely.
For other questions, please reach out to your customer success manager. And thank you so much for joining us today. Also, thank you, Robin, for everything we needed to know about AP and AR. This webinar presentation will be available within a week on our Knowledge Center. Just make sure you put the title in the search box to find it. And for those of you that we need to follow up with, you should see those responses from your CSM very soon. So thanks again for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you, Robin. Bye.